Call to order the meeting of the California Community College's Board of Governors, sitting as the governing body of the new California Online Community College. We're now in order. Please call the roll.
Hildegard Aguinaldo.
Here.
Darius Anderson.
Here.
Arnaldo Avalos. Jeffrey Baum.
Here.
Connie Conway. Tom Epstein.
Here.
Cecilia Estolano.
Here.
Jolena Grande.
Here.
Pamela Haynes.
Here.
Jennifer Perry.
Here.
Mon Fawn. Bill Rawlings.
Here.
Valerie Shah.
Here.
Alexander Walker Griffin.
Here.
Thank you.
I don't know. It looks like something beeped. Christina, you got Valerie Shaw?
Yes, we do. And I will remind our colleagues who are on a remote location that your mic is live. Okay, and I think we have members of the public gathered in West Los Angeles. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Excellent. Okay, so we are going to ask now Board Member Anderson to please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
There's no
Okay, the discussion of the order of the agenda. Mr. LaForestier, did you want to do that, or?
I could just provide a quick overview of the order of the agenda.
Yeah.
Sure. Happy to.
Let me just open up by saying I want to welcome everybody to a pretty momentous day, right? This is the first organizing meeting of the new California Community Online College. Our general counsel is going to walk us through what we're going to be doing today, and I'm going to say a few opening remarks, and then we'll get right into the agenda. It's a pretty packed agenda. We're going to provide context for all of this and march ourselves orderly through this. We're going to take the time we need to because all of these matters are quite important, and we want to make sure everybody fully understands what we're doing here today, the implications. We can get going. Go ahead, Mr. LaForestier.
Thank you, President Estolano, Vice President Epstein, Chancellor Oakley. Good afternoon, everyone. So the first thing I want to start with is an overview of what we're here to do today. We are here at the first meeting of the California Online Community College. And it is established under the law as a district. So we are sitting as essentially a different entity today. I wanted to just go through a quick PowerPoint that I'll put up on your screens for you, just to make sure that we are oriented to where we are. That should be coming up any second now. There we are. So we'll be focused on this on the right-hand part of the screen. On the left-hand side, you see the Board of Governors and the organizational structure that you're accustomed to, the Board of Governors, the Chancellor's Office, and the Chancellor's Office staff. What we are here to do today is to give meaning to the right-hand side of the screen, which is the Board of Governors, acting in its capacity as the California Online Community College District. And as you will have seen in the board agenda items, one of the first things that we are going to be doing is adopting a working name for the Board of Governors when it's acting in this capacity as the Board of Trustees, which will parallel the practices of community college districts because the Board of Governors will be acting as a community college district. And so as part of the policies and procedures of the online district, community college online district, the Board of Governors will be calling itself the Board of Trustees. We will walk through resolutions that would establish the executive committee of the Board of Trustees, and we will explain the various powers and duties of the executive committee in comparison to those responsibilities that will be retained by the full Board of Trustees. We will also provide some authority to the Chancellor to conduct the functions of managing and administering the online college until such time as a CEO is appointed. We will deal with a resolution that provides some authority to the Chancellor to start engaging in the process of identifying a CEO in collaboration with the Executive Committee, and also provide the Chancellor with some contracting authority. So those are the things that are on the agenda. And I think as we walk through these various items, it's important to keep in mind that we're creating a new enterprise, and I think we will find along the way that we will learn a lot of things. So the purpose of today is to establish those core functions that are necessary to have the online community college start performing its work. There will be other functions that will come before the Executive Committee and the Board of Trustees in the months to come that will more fully flesh out the responsibilities and how they're going to sort of spring to life. So that's the outline of the enterprise that we're going to go through today. And so I think we're ready to proceed to the next item. Great. If the President's ready.
Great. So we're now on the President's report. I'm just going to say a few remarks. Typically, we spend this time talking about what we've done in the last month. This is the first time we're meeting as the governing board of this new online community college district. And I want to just remind us a little bit of how we got here. And I think the Chancellor will probably do some of this background as well. But Governor Jerry Brown sent a letter to our Chancellor about a year ago.
It was a year ago last May.
Last May, okay, so about 18 months ago. Asking the Chancellor and the Board of Governors to provide ideas about how to create a fully online community college. And the idea being that technology can enable us, as the state of California, to provide educational resources to folks who would otherwise not have access. And over the course of the last year and a half or so, there have been a number of discussions, lots of learnings that have been going on, lots of outreach, much debate. And we have created a body through the legislature and the governor's office and the chancellor's office that is aimed at providing short-term competency-based certificates, programs that are non-duplicative of what's offered in our regular community colleges for folks who might not otherwise access our programs. It's aimed at individuals who are maybe between the ages of 24 and 35 who maybe have attended our colleges once or twice, but have never completed a certificate, never completed a degree. Oftentimes, these are individuals who are working multiple jobs. These might be individuals who are parents caring for children at homes or taking care of their own parents, and not at a position where they can take a class in a regular course of study in our community colleges that start, 2 times a year on very set schedules. So the idea is to take the best advancements that we've learned in online curriculum and online coursework, bring it to a new online community college that is aimed at opening access in a meaningful way to individuals who are struggling, having a tough time, and need a leg up, need an opportunity to get a kind of certificate that's recognized by a sector or an industry that needs help filling positions. And then by doing that, being able to realize wage gains and maybe having a pathway into the middle class. So this is a way for us to expand our reach beyond the 2.2 million students that already attend our colleges. It's an exciting opportunity. There is no other state college system that is attempting to do what we are going to be starting today. So it's a wonderful time to be sitting here with all of you, and I am delighted that so many of you could come in person and even on the phone to begin this enterprise. And I'm excited about getting us through this process. And I want you to keep in mind why we're doing this. Think about a single mom. Think about a worker who's working a number of jobs. Think about folks in rural areas who have no ready access to a community college program. These are the folks we're reaching, or folks who are it just doesn't work for them to do a conventional class. So we're trying to reach folks who we've failed in the past, and now we're going to create an opportunity for them to have the avenue of training, of certificates, of attainment, of achievement that will take them to the next level. And it's a pretty wonderful thing to be able to do. So I want to thank the legislature and the governor and the chancellor's office in putting this program together, and all of the participants up and down the state who were part of the discussions, part of the debate, and made it possible for us to have this organizing meeting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the Chancellor, say a few words.
Thank you, Board Chair Estolano. It is a privilege and a pleasure to be opening up this meeting. It has been a year in the making at least, and we've learned a lot of lessons from all the feedback along the way, and we're here really as a culmination of a lot of work and certainly of the vision of Governor Brown. I just have a few things I'd like to say to the Board of Trustees. We have at least 2 members of this board who have functioned as trustees of a board, and certainly Member Haynes and Member Baum have both, well, one currently has that pleasure, the other had that pleasure. You understand the role of trustees. To the rest of the board, I'd say, really, I would ask you to leave your hats at the door when you walk in here, your role as a board of governor, your role in other organizations, and really allow yourself to really think through what this now means to the students that we will be serving directly. Because we are now in that role where we are directly, not indirectly through the 114 colleges, but directly serving the needs of students. And these initial few meetings will be revolve around how we begin to lay the groundwork today that will be the foundation for the next 50, 60, 70 years of whatever this online college takes shape to be. This is something that will fundamentally, I believe, change the way we look at how we do business in the California community colleges. This is not replicating what we've had before. While 114 colleges do a tremendous job at serving the needs of California, this will provide us an additional way of serving those needs. So the other thing I'd like to say is, as we walk into this role, that we not fall victims to a narrow view of thinking. What we know today will look very different tomorrow, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. So I ask us to, while it is hard to say with complete certainty what the road will look like over the next 5 years, what we can say is that if we don't limit ourselves by what we know today or the narrow viewpoints we might have about what we're about to do, we will be able to really build something that is transformative. And that is my hope for us, that we take this as an opportunity, a unique, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to build something fundamental to the future of the state of California from scratch. That is not a privilege that we get often in our system of higher education, but we are giving that opportunity now. To the public, I'd say it is with great pride that we begin this work on behalf of the people of California. That is why we are here, and that is why this online college was created, to better serve the needs of Californians going forward into the future. And we will do everything possible to ensure that you get the highest quality, most affordable education imaginable. With the great reputation of the California colleges behind it. By no means do we begin this journey knowing everything about what we're about to do. We are going into this journey with the expectation that we will learn and build around the students that we're going to serve. And that will be our guiding light. To our partners in labor, to our partners, employers, employer organizations, industry leaders, we pledge to you that we are going to work very hard to serve the needs of your organizations, because the needs of your organizations are the needs of the state of California. To our faculty, I want to say thank you for all of the critical input that you've given us over the last year. Today is not the end of that input. Today is, again, just a continuation. We expect to put together a faculty for this college that is reflective of the reputation of the faculty of our 114 colleges, and we would expect no less from the faculty of the 115th college. And then finally, to our colleges, while there was a lot of disagreement and debate about how we should create this new college, you can expect that this college will partner with the other 114 colleges to make the system better, to make the 114 colleges better, and to provide additional opportunities to learn and grow and better serve all of California. So again, thank you all for your commitment, and I look forward to the journey.
Great. Seeing that this is our first meeting, there are no minutes to approve. Okay. So on to item 1, where our General Counsel, Marc Leforestier, is going to go through an overview of board responsibility and obligations. Go ahead, Marc.
Okay, thank you, President. I will continue on with the PowerPoint presentation and just walk through a few kind of key touchstones on authority of the Board of Trustees. So the statutory authority that the Board of Trustees is going to exercise comes from the Budget Trailer Bill, and principally in Education Code 7501, which enumerates all of the authorities of the Board of Trustees. And if you want a more full enumeration of the language, it appears in Board Item 7, which we will get to a little later, and that is the item that addresses the establishment of the Executive Committee and delegation of authority. Executive Committee, but that's really where a number of the issues are dealt with in detail. The Board of Trustees is responsible for administering the online college as an independent college district, and it is to establish the guiding principles and the policies and standards of the online college. And that sort of general 30,000-foot strategic kind of oversight will be retained by the Board of Trustees, notwithstanding the delegation of authority to the Executive Committee that's proposed today. And of course, any authority that is not specifically delegated to the Executive Committee would be retained by the Board of Trustees. So that's something, kind of a touchstone to think about as we walk through the rest of the agenda items today. The next slide just shows the key differences. Chancellor Oakley mentioned that we need to think about ourselves in a different capacity when we're sitting as the Board of Trustees and think about our direct role to the students. And so the distinctions between the two roles that the Board of Governors or Board of Trustees will be fulfilling is outlined at a high level in this slide. So we're now operating as a district agency. We're subject to the board's policies and procedures. So when the Board of Trustees is sitting as the state agency Board of Governors, and the Board of Governors passes regulations and policies that the entire system is required to comply with, those will also affect the online college. So that's something that you will want to keep in mind as you're wearing your Board of Governors hat as well. The Board of Trustees will be delegating functions to the Executive Committee, which we'll talk about in greater detail later. And then also will retain oversight over the Executive Committee. So the Board of Trustees can expect reports from the Executive Committee on what its activities have been with respect to the online college. The Executive Committee delegation is specifically authorized by the Online College Act, which allows the Board of Trustees to delegate to its members certain authorities. And that is the basis for the delegation that we're pursuing today. The Executive Committee's activities will also be subject to the Brown Act, so publicly noticed meetings and public agendas. Its authorities will be delegated to it by the Board of Trustees. It doesn't have any other source of authority, and then will report its activities to the Board of Trustees. The Chief Executive Officer's authorities are outlined in the Online College Education Act, but we will not be addressing that today. There's no CEO yet. We're a few months down the road from the appointment of a Chief Executive Officer. But I just flag the authorities of the CEO. So as we're walking through authority today and you think that there are gaps, those are probably filled by what the statute contemplates the CEO doing. So first of all, the CEO will serve at the pleasure of the Board of Trustees. And that is authority we do not contemplate delegating to the executive committee. The CEO develops fiscal policies and practices, enters into agreements, establishes the advisory council process that will involve trustees of other community college districts, represented employees, and students of the college, and then, of course, manages and controls the day-to-day operations of the college. Okay, so that's the general overview of what we're talking about today. And I think we can move on to the next item if your president's ready. Any questions?
We can open up to questions. Some of the specifics that were in Mark's presentation, we're going to be handling in specific agenda items farther down the line. But if there are any questions about the overall framework, we are now sitting as the governing body of the online community college district. Any differences that you might have about that? Board Member Anderson, and I also will call out for Board Members, Board Member Shaw and Board Member Aguinaldo if you have questions as well. Go ahead, Board Member Anderson.
Question, has the scope of the CEO's job description been drafted yet?
It is not.
Any other questions around the horseshoe? Board Members Shaw and Aguinaldo, do you have any questions?
No questions, President Estolano.
To follow up with Member Anderson's, when we get to the board item relating to delegation to the Chancellor on the CEO's authority, we'll provide a little more detail for you then. Ajita Menon will come up and join me and provide you some status.
If there are no questions on that first item, let's move on to item number 2, which is adoption of the Board of Trustees policies and procedures. Go ahead, Mr. Laforestier.
Okay, so we conducted a survey of policies and procedures that are fairly typical of boards of trustees around the state for community colleges, and have extracted from those and adapted them for our purposes a number of policies and procedures that we think are necessary at this phase. So they deal with the adoption of the operational name Board of Trustees. There is a mission statement, Board of Trustees, officers, compensation, and travel expenses, etc. The Executive Committee's officers, meetings, and authority, business and fiscal standards, although not for the CEO, that's reserved for a later date. Compliance with various public law matters, public records, equal employment and non-discrimination requirements, and conflicts of interest. One thing that we have it's going to be required is another Form 700 to be filed by members of the body, because you are assuming another office in effect. So we'll provide you information on that at an appropriate time.
One moment. Go ahead, Board Member Baum.
As you raise that on the Form 700, you could usually just check a box and designate the additional agency. So would
Yeah,
that be
that you're a multiple filer.
Multiple filer, yeah, that's an option.
Anything else in your presentation, Mark?
I think that's all. That's their questions.
So I want to make sure we've all gone through this. These are the basic operating procedures of the board. They can be amended by a vote of the Board of Trustees. This isn't permanent, but it just gives us some regular operating procedures. Some of the most basic things you think about, but you actually don't think about. You assume these rules are already in place. They are not. We're starting from scratch. So these are very basic. There's not much that deviates from what you would typically see from our own standing orders. Frankly, we took our own standing orders and adopted them for the Board of Trustees. But I would note that what we're first doing here in this resolution, if you look on the resolution, we don't have page numbers on this agenda. Item 2, attachment 1, the second page with the whereases, we're actually establishing that our name is the California Online Community College District Board of Trustees. And I call that out because it's just simpler to have a different name rather than being the governing board, the Board of Governors serving as the governing board. We'll just be known as the Board of Trustees of the Online Community College District. So we know that when we are serving at the Board of Trustees, we take off our Board of Governors hat, we put on our Board of Trustees hat, and we're in trustees world. We've identified the types of officers we're going to have. We've identified our compensation, our reimbursements, how we'll have meetings, that we're subject to the Brown Act, which is different than what we would do if we're serving as the Board of Governors. talks about agendas and meetings and quorums. So if there are any specific questions, this is a time to ask them, and then I'll entertain a motion to approve. Anybody? Yes, Board Member Haynes.
So are we approving each of the action items individually, or will it be in?
We're going to do each item
Okay,
individually. So this is item number 2, and we're asking if you have any questions on this. We're going to take all of these in order.
Okay.
So any questions on our policies and procedures? And they're all laid out. Here's what I think about 8 pages. Yeah, go ahead, Board Member Rawlings.
Just a quick question. So we have these policies, procedures. This would be parallel to, say, administrative procedures at a local college. So as we add to this, I was wondering, have we thought about an organizational structure for the document itself that would then, we'd have a Board of Trustees section, then each of the different subsections being able to break that in a little more detail as we go forward?
There will certainly be more detail as you go forward. And one of the things that we've thought about, one of the first things that we will be doing is retaining independent counsel for the Board of Trustees. And we anticipate that there will be a more fulsome version of these policies developed over time as more facility, more resources to have dedicated to the online college.
Yeah, there will certainly be a structure similar to what you're used to, board policies, administrative policies, personnel policies, as we add to the list.
Yes, Board Member Anderson.
Will there be a shared resources agreement from the standpoint initially between the Chancellor's office and the board?
The Chancellor's office and the Board of Trustees.
Yes.
One of the things that the policies and procedures contemplate is reimbursing the Chancellor's office for expenses. So that is one thing that we could go forward with. And in the contracting authority that's provided in a couple of the resolutions, there's a resolution that provides general contracting authority to the Chancellor. That would be an area where we could work out an agreement on those.
Board Member Grande.
Thank you. I had a question on the competitive bidding requirements excluding professional service contracts. If I could get just a little exclusion.
That's a exclusion that we have under the Chancellor's office current rules, and it's fairly typical in the districts to provide a competitive bidding exception for personal services contracts. There is still an obligation to report to the Board of Trustees for those kinds of contracts. There'll still be oversight.
Board Member Baum.
You just want to offer any rules of thumbs about differences between the Badgley-Keene, under which we operate, and the Board of Trustees, the Brown Act that governs.
I have to confess, Member Baum, that I'm not an expert on the differences between the two. One of the most obvious differences is the notice differences. The Badgley-Keene Act requires a 10-day notice. The Brown Act requires only a 3-day notice. I complied with that.
Yeah, Board Member Baum.
No, and there are obviously prohibitions about serial meetings. And
yes, so all of
things like
those prohibitions are duplicated in both the Brown and Badgley-Keene Act. So prohibitions on serial meetings, very similar requirements with respect to closed meetings. Closed meeting is appropriate. So a lot of those distinctions, I think, would not be transparent to the board members.
my recommendation too, since we're new too, we adopt these as they are, which seem pretty straightforward. We review them in the first, after a period of time, so that we can see how it.
And I think we contemplate, or we think it would be recommended that once we have our outside counsel on board, that they do a training for us on this, really from the basics. Because we were trained on Badgley-Keene as a Board of Governors. We've not been trained on the Brown Act. Some of us have received that from other positions we may have served on, but we'll have a training on the Brown Act, maybe on the Public Records Act, the typical trainings that a Board of Trustees would receive once we get that outside legal counsel on board and can provide that. And then part of it is, as Mark noted, as we move forward, there'll probably be amendments to this to fill them out a little bit, and that outside legal counsel will be able to provide us additional information on that. Board Member Haynes?
So under policies and procedures, item number 5, meetings, we've been talking about meetings here. In that third paragraph, it says notice of meetings and agenda must be mailed. And it does not elaborate on any other methods of transmission. So for example, email or so how will that be interpreted? U.S. mail or other means of?
There will be mail. We've also begun compiling a list of people who have requested notice of meetings and copies of agendas, so that we will be emailing those to people when agendas become available. And we're also posting the agenda on a web page that we have devoted to the online college for the moment, but we're also working on transitioning to a unique online internet presence for the online college that I think is a month or so away. We'll have all the materials there.
So in that case, will you then go back to expanding the term mailed?
We can do
at that point?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, in addition, Board Member Haynes, this gives us an opportunity to look at an electronic board documents. And so this would be a good place to transition us away from paper to whether it be board books or board docs, depending on which platform we like the best, but that'll make it even easier to access the material as soon as they're posted.
One of the issues that keeps arising as we go through this process is, on the one hand, we aspire to having the Board of Trustees behave like any other Board of Trustees for a community college, but at the same time, there's recognition that a cookie-cutter approach isn't necessarily going to be the best one for a fully online college. So we need to be thoughtful about how we adapt what are existing requirements to the new college, while at the same time trying to be compliant, obviously, with what the law requires.
Are there any questions from board members Shaw or Aguinaldo?
President Solano, just one question for me. This is Hildy Aguinaldo. I'm looking at the resolution number 2018-1, specifically the first whereas, where it says the California State Legislature has determined that 2.5 million Californians are constitute a stranded workforce. I'm aware that language is pulled directly from the trailer bill, at least the iteration of the trailer bill that I looked at some point before it was passed formally. Are we comfortable with that definition as leading this resolution, cognizant of the fact that I think it was section 75001F in the trailer bill was talking about offering non-duplicative courses, and then this statistic that nearly 1/2 of the 2.5 million stranded workforce population is in LA, Riverside, San Bernardino, and San Diego. I just wanted to make sure that that was exactly the population we identified as benefiting from this online college.
That
The definition
no,
go ahead.
that is the population that was identified and specifically discussed with the legislature as we walked through this. It is certainly the 2.5 million that are specifically targeted are certainly not the only population that can be served by the online college, but that is what we spoke to this population specifically and their needs. And so I think that's why you see it appear in the resolution.
Okay. I see that the fourth whereas talks about economists believe a skills mismatch partially explains why the labor force participation remains low among the working age population, and that seems to be one of the most important points of establishing an online college. And I just wanted to make sure that those first 5 whereases establish the needs, or at least iterate the needs in the most effective way possible.
Yeah, I think they're drawn straight from the language of the legislation, and they seem to have the most salient points. It kind of communicates the context of why this has been initiated. I appreciate you highlighting them because it's critical that folks read this and understand what's motivating us here. Is that it, Board Member Aguinaldo?
Yes, ma'am.
And Board Member Shaw, any questions?
No.
Board Member Baum.
I wanted to thank Board Member Aguinaldo for raising that, only in that, as we set out in the first sentence to identify 2.5 million, and even in our own projections, this online college will serve in the tens of thousands to get started. That could imply that we're not even coming close to meeting that need, and are we setting ourselves up for mismatched expectations, resources that we will have to then come back and explain down the road. So I understand the need. There is growing body of research that I think I shared before about how there are a number of people in what they call education deserts, don't have access to a local college or even sufficient online resources that we need to address. But when we say 2.5 million, and 2 years from now, we're serving in the tens of thousands, is that going to be an issue?
Chancellor.
Certainly, I mean, I don't think the expectation here is that we would serve 2.5 million, and I understand that where those who were not in the day-to-day conversations could misinterpret this, and so I think it's worth highlighting that this is a population that was identified as a primary population to target. There is no expectation that we are going to serve 2.5 million workers. What we are clear about is the needs that have been demonstrated by this 2.5 million population. And certainly if we just serve 10% of this population, it will be a huge accomplishment. But certainly it is what motivates the work that we're doing, the needs of this growing population. And so I think while I certainly understand the way it's been presented and the way it was taken from the enacting legislation is not clear, but this is one of the motivating factors, the needs of this population as they've been identified, but that does not mean that this is 2.5 million students that we're expected to serve.
I would suggest that in in the sixth recital, we add in the phrase whereas to, and then add in begin to address. Might help. To begin to would be the additional. Board Member Haynes?
That's perfect. Just as a way of clarifying, usually when you come to the legislature, they want to know magnitude. They want to know how big, what is the problem, how big is the problem, and to do the research relative to what that population is. And so hopefully we won't throw out the baby for the bathwater, or throw out the bathwater and whatever that is. The other point that I would like to make is, as we obviously absolutely need to make certain that we are going into the areas of most need. But in the beginning, we're going to be working on the willing. We're looking for students, but we're also looking for employers that are willing to do this work with us as we begin this journey. And we obviously will need to be cognizant where those employers are, and we will need to do the shovel work in those communities where there are employers, and but in some places they're not nearly as many as need to be. So I think we just need to be cognizant of we're working with the willing. We're going to expand that. We're going to do spade work in those areas and in those communities that we need to do it. And anything is better than what we have now, and of students who are just not, or residents who are just not coming into our systems for any number of reasons that act as barriers.
Okay, Board Member Anderson?
And I do think at some point it would be worthwhile for us to play on Member Baum's point to establish what our expectations are and how a rollout will actually look, because as we look to the legislature, there will be a question of what we're actually spending and the number of people that we're benefiting. And as we ramp this up, I think us as the Board of Trustees should be very clear of what our expectations are and what we're trying to go ahead and accomplish. And as the Chancellor says, if it's 10%, that's still a very heady number. And, you know, how long are those people? Is their completion? But maybe the executive committee could come back with, you know, what are our expectations as a board?
Okay, if there are no other comments or questions, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Board Member Perry, go right ahead. Okay.
That's why I just raised my hand. At the risk of sort of opening up a Pandora's box, when I look at, I have to count my whereases, the whereas immigrants, military veterans, you mentioned single women in your opening remarks, and I wonder if single parents, I know all this stuff has been looked at through, you know, through a very scrupulous lens, but it struck me that you mentioned single moms, and single parents do seem to be a group that we do address and could address. And I think back to the Spark program that it was so inspirational. So I would put out there that we might contemplate adding single parents to that whereas.
Any objection?
After military veterans?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. After military
I don't have a
veterans.
preference as to order.
Yeah. Any other comments or suggestions? Board Member Grande?
It's to piggyback on
Go right ahead.
the comment that was made about single parents when it was addressed in relation to single mothers. We have two component parts of the policies and procedures on compliance with non-discrimination and prohibited out-of-state travel to those areas where there are discriminatory laws against lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. But throughout the document, we use his and her pronouns rather than his, her, or their. And I'm wondering if we might be able to adjust those as well to identify that targeted population through this unique opportunity that we have.
So we could handle that with an amendment to these policies and procedures, or it's something that we could take up at the next board meeting with changes. That's something that the board wants to do.
I think we can make those, that can be part of the adoption, that those amendments will be made, and then we'll bring it back at the next board meeting to take a look at the changes that have been made.
Okay.
Confirm them. Makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense? Board Member Grande? Any objection on the phone to proceeding in that manner, using his, hers, and theirs?
Thank you.
No objection, President Estolano.
Great. Board Member Shaw?
No comment.
You all are together, correct, in the same location?
Yes, we are.
Okay, fabulous. Okay, so any other comments or suggestions, and I'll enumerate the changes that we've suggested. Yes.
There was one change that was made on page 6 of the policies and procedures. A reference to co-chair was changed to vice chair.
Oh, Vice Chair.
Yes, and so on the version that
Oh, I
has been
see.
distributed to everyone,
That's at our
that has
desk.
been corrected.
And board members in a remote location must have received an updated version of this, I take it?
I believe so.
Okay. So, board members Shaw and Aguinaldo, we're talking about page 6, the policies, procedures. We're talking about officers in the first paragraph. The president and vice president of the California Community Colleges Board of Governors shall serve as chair and co-chair respectively. It's now going to be chair and vice chair.
Correct.
And that was a correction that the staff caught right before we did this meeting. Okay, if there are no other changes, I'm going to enumerate the changes, and Mr. LaForestier is going to catch anything I missed.
Okay.
First, on the 5th paragraph of recitals, whereas immigrants, military veterans, insert single parents, comma, and incarcerated informally, the same as remains. In the 6th paragraph of recitals, whereas to begin to address the needs described above, rest continues. And then on page 6 of the policies and procedures themselves, under Paragraph 3, the officers substitute vice chair for co-chair in the first paragraph. And then finally, throughout the policies and procedures document, we will substitute he and she with gender neutral pronouns, he, she, there, they, her, there. And with that, that's the staff recommendation to adopt the policies and procedures of the Online California Community College District. I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Board Member Anderson, second by Board Member Grande. All those in favor say yes.
We need to count the votes.
Oh, right, because we have two people. Okay, so we'll do a roll call. Ms. Castro, please read the roll.
Hildegard Alguinaldo.
Aye.
Darius Anderson.
Aye.
Arnaldo Avalos, absent. Jeffrey Baum.
Yes.
Connie Conway, absent.
You don't have to call those who are absent.
Okay.
Christina.
Tom Epstein. Cecilia Estolano.
Aye.
Jolina Grande.
Aye.
Pamela Haynes.
Aye.
Jennifer Perry. Bill Rawlings.
Aye.
Valerie Shaw.
Go say it one more time.
Yes.
Alexander Walker Griffin.
Aye.
That's a unanimous vote of the members present. I'm calling to order, just to have belt and suspenders now, the official Board of Trustees of the California Community Online College District. Okay, we are now members of the Board of Trustees. Item number 3, delegation to the Chancellor.
Okay, the California Online Community College Act requires the Board of Trustees to administer the California Online Community College as its governing board, as we've discussed. It is authorized as part of those duties to contract with the Foundation for California Community Colleges for the purposes of providing administrative support for the college's startup functions. The legislation also provides broad authority to the board to delegate its authority to members of the board, to the Chancellor, and to others under appropriate circumstances. So the resolution that we've brought before the Board of Trustees today is to provide a delegation of authority to the Chancellor. And those delegations would be to authorize the Chancellor to take official actions to manage the online college, including but not limited to acquiring or disposing of online college assets, entering into contracts, making expenditures, managing facilities, funds, personnel, and property until the appointment of a permanent chief executive officer. It would also authorize the Chancellor to contract with the Foundation for California Community Colleges for the purpose of providing administrative support for the college's startup activities. And with respect to contracts, the Chancellor, under the authority of the resolution, would be required to promptly report any contracts entered on behalf of the college to the chair and vice chair of the executive committee. Any official actions taken by the Chancellor under the authority of this resolution involving more than $100,000 in value would require ratification by the executive committee, and contracts below that threshold would be effective upon the Chancellor's execution. We derive the $100,000 threshold and the framing of that contract authority from our existing standing orders, and this is a pretty close parallel to the existing authority that the Chancellor has. So that's the substance of this resolution, and we would ask for your approval of it.
The one last point is that the Chancellor and its designees can be reimbursed for expenses on the same terms as the Chief Executive Officer. So because he will be acting as essentially as a CEO until we get a CEO up and running. Any concluding remarks? And that's your presentation,
That's
Chancellor. Any remarks on this?
No, all I would say is that, I will be serving in the role of making sure we can operate the college, getting it moving, doing everything possible to set up the infrastructure. And then as quickly as possible, moving the process forward so that we can hire a chief executive officer. I have no desire to be a college president again. I have to for a little while.
Okay, let me entertain any questions and comments from the members of the Board of Trustees and see if we have any public comment on these matters. No? No public. Okay. Any questions? Trustee Grande.
Thank you very much. Although it was taken to something that is similar to the Board of Governors for the spending limits, how similar is that to a typical Board of Trustees for a community college district?
We conducted a survey, and we found that there was a range of authority between approximately $50,000 and $175,000. Although the $175,000 was a bit of an outlier, typical authority was below $100,000.
175 is what I used to have.
Any other trustees have questions? It's a really important question to ask, and we're going to have quite a few startup costs, but it seems like a reasonable range given the size of this endeavor. Questions from trustees in a remote location? Any questions? Trustee
Yeah, I have a
Aguinaldo?
question.
Trustee-
When are we going to get a CEO?
Trustee Shaw?
Yes, that's me.
That's you. Item number 4. We will be discussing delegating authority to conduct a CEO search. Chancellor, you
Member
probably have
Shaw,
to comment
Member
on
Shaw,
this.
are you already unhappy with the current E CEO?
No. I'm not
That
unhappy.
didn't take long.
I'm just curious. I know. I'm just curious as to how long will it take? It's going to take. Because we know,
It
we know how long
typically
it takes
takes
to get
about
used.
6 months
This is
from beginning to
months,
end.
okay.
And it's my understanding that this is a high-profile position. Folks have been following this nationally for quite some time. There will be quite a bit of interest in this position, but we want to get it right. So I think we want to bring somebody on board quickly, but it has to be the right person. This first hire will be pivotal in setting the tone and the expectations and the success of this new district. So we're going to proceed. We're not going to drag our feet. Certainly, as the members of the trustees would like to see that CEO hired quickly, but we need to take the right time to do it. So we'll discuss that in item 4. But for now, we do need somebody to be able to sign checks and sign orders and get things going. Any other questions over in the remote location? And then I'll go to Trustee Baum.
Thank you.
No other questions, President Estolano.
Okay, Trustee Baum.
I was just going to move approval of the resolution.
Excellent. I have a motion.
Second?
Okay, I'll take the second from Vice Chair Epstein. All those in favor, please say aye. Oh, wait, do I have to call the roll every time?
Yes.
I do. Well, let's keep going. Let's call the roll.
Hildegard Aguinaldo,
Aye.
Darius Anderson,
Yes.
Jeffrey Baum,
Yes.
Tom Epstein, Cecilia Estolano,
Yes.
Jolena Grande,
Yes.
Pamela Haynes,
Aye.
Jennifer Perry,
Yes.
Bill Rawlings,
Yes.
Valerie Shaw,
Yes.
Alexander Walker Griffin.
Yes.
That's unanimous vote. We'll move on to item 4, delegation to conduct CEO search.
So this item is is a more specific contracting authority to the Chancellor than the last authority that we just delegated to the Chancellor. And the purpose for this is to allow us to enter into a contract with a CEO search firm as soon as possible. So we took a slightly different approach to sort of putting a framework around the Chancellor's authority. So the intent is to work with the Executive Committee to design a process for selecting the Chief Executive Officer. And under this delegation, it is the Executive Committee that will make the recommendation of the candidate for presentation to the full Board of Trustees by the Chancellor. So it's the Executive Committee's recommendation. With respect to the contract is required to be at or below market rates. And the Chancellor will have authority under this resolution to enter into it. So there isn't the $100,000 cap. I'm not sure how much a CEO contract is going to cost, but it needs to be at market rates. And if we enter in, it allows us authority to enter into that contract before the next Board of Trustees meeting, or that's why it's framed a little differently.
And my recollection is that when we conducted the Chancellor search so many years ago, I think it was less than 100,000.
It was less than 100, that's
And
Great investment, by the way.
yeah, they did an excellent job. Ajita, you wanted to comment on this?
Below $100,000.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to address the timeline question at a high level if folks are still interested.
Yeah, I
Question
think
about
that
it?
would be helpful. Do you want to make just a quick presentation on the timeline, just to frame it up?
Sure. So I'll just mention that the timeline is in draft form. We'll get more specific with the timeline once we've actually retained the search firm. We anticipate putting an RFI out for the search firm later this week or early next, with a closing date aimed at firm selection by the end of the month. Beginning in September, we'll work with the search firm to develop a search strategy, position description, desirable candidate characteristics, kind of a candidate profile, potential salary range, and all of that will come to the Board of Trustees Executive Committee for approval. We hope to launch the search by the third week in September and conclude the search at the end of October. November will be spent interviewing candidates. We hope by the end of the year to have a candidate up to the Board of Trustees for approval, but likely, given timelines and schedules and holidays, we would anticipate that formal approval would occur in January.
Trustee Haynes.
So I agree with President Estolano that this is a critical search, finding the right person to lead us, and that will require a lot of experience and a broad set of skills and experience in the area. So I just want to, and the search firm will be critical to that. So I'm hoping that you will ensure that the search firm has a successfully demonstrated experience in identifying a diverse pool of ethnically, racially, and those who are culturally competent candidates for this position. I assume that it's going to be a national search. Also, it seems to me that candidate, there are a number of areas, and I am not a digital person, but someone who is good at relative to administration of digital environments, as well as the use of online teaching pedagogies. It's to me, as I think about this, it's just a broad grouping, and it will require a national search. It will also require a search firm that has demonstrated skills in trying to do this. So I just wanted to put that on the record. Thank you.
Appreciate that comment. Trustee Anderson.
Quick question, because we are doing this for the first time ever, and I think, as the president said, there isn't a national model out there that we can compare ourselves to. What is the profile that you're actually looking for, and how do you come up with a compensation base? Are we comparing this to other presidents of the campuses, or are we comparing this to a job in the tech field?
My guess is it's going to be a hybrid of some of all of those things. So we'll have to look at compensation as it looks across the system. We'll have to look at compensation for comparable providers, while others aren't doing exactly what we're doing. There are a number of leading providers in the online space. We can look to them to understand not just about compensation, but about the right acumen for a particular profile, some of the right proficiencies. So we'll work with the search firm to identify some job descriptions that are kind of maybe already in providers in the field, in addition to looking across the system.
I think one of the other things to consider is, because this is new, we're still not clear where the home of the online college is going to be, and that will impact the salary. So, living in the Sacramento Valley is different than living in the Bay Area, or living in the Central Valley, or living in Southern California. So I think while the expectation is that initially home will be somewhere nearby, it's something that the board will need to consider in any recruitment of a CEO. The other thing is for us to consider is it is sometimes more difficult to recruit somebody for an organization that is brand new, where there's no longevity, versus an existing college district that has a long-standing board and there's some security in terms of who am I going to be working with. So those are all things we need to consider as we move forward. I don't know that I have answers to all those questions, but we will need some flexibility in that initial hire.
Trustee Baum.
Again, what we're being asked to do is to authorize or delegate to the Chancellor the process of the search for the CEO, so that then the Chancellor will oversee the selection of an executive search firm and a process to do that with periodic check-ins with the executive committee and then a full report out to the board when a candidate, or regular reporting to the board, and then a full report out when a possible final candidate is selected.
That's correct.
And so we're not necessarily approving a job description with this. We're not approving and all that. We're asking the Chancellor to lead that process and then report be overseen by the executive committee, and then the board will be regularly informed.
That's correct, Trustee Baum. So the idea that the executive committee is probably going to be working with the Chancellor in drafting the job description, the duties, will be conducting the search, interviewing candidates, and then serving up a recommendation to the full Board of Trustees, and the Board of Trustees will make the ultimate appointment of the CEO. But there's quite a bit of work that, as you know, Trustee Baum, that goes into a search, and it takes a while, so we want to get it up and running as quickly as possible. Trustee Anderson.
I will just mention, we will have a commitment from our end on, as early as possible, identifying the timeline and identifying key dates that folks might need to hold on their schedule, understanding that we're talking about operating on a pretty aggressive timeline. So that is a commitment that we have to you.
Trustee Anderson.
This is a question for the Chancellor. Because of the fact that, it will take some time to go ahead and find this person, and we want to get moving, how much will actually be done before we go ahead and select this individual? I know we've already looked at a number of contracts, but, because this is all new, is this person going to be inheriting a half-cooked college, or are we going to go ahead and wait for that individual to get here, or what?
It will not be a fully cooked college. There will be a chance to, give it flavor. But we are going to lay out the foundation of the online college. So, we want to make sure, well, there's a couple of things happening. One, the foundation to be able to conduct business. All that should be done before the new CEO gets here. So procurement, payroll, setting up bank accounts, procuring lease space, all that legwork should be done. The other is we have an advanced team that is funded through some of our partners to develop sort of a game plan, options for the new CEO. So, for example, looking at all of the platforms out there for delivering this competency-based education, we can do a survey of that landscape, make recommendations, put together a playbook for the CEO. We don't want to prejudge or make determinations for the founding team of the college, but we want to lay out as much of the mapping as much as possible. And certainly there is work being done now with partners like SCIU and others looking at critical skills and the pathways we've already committed to. So that work will continue. But really, the fundamental choices will be left to the new CEO and his or her founding team.
Vice President Epstein.
In other words, it'll be half cooked but not half baked.
Let me just, my concern is that, because the back end is so important, and that's what you're talking about doing, that forward-leaning component of this, and that's what the students actually see in that interaction, has so much to do about how quickly the information age is moving.
Yes.
And, you're only going to have one opportunity to do this right. If it's not done properly, the students will bolt and you can have a collapse. So I would hope that whoever he or she is that is selected, gets the opportunity to be part of that forward portion of the portal.
That's the intent.
We agree.
Trustee Baum.
Last point is I just want to echo something that Trustee Haynes said. that, as we talked about in the beginning, we've identified actually the most difficult group of students to reach. These are people for every other model across the state has not worked. And so that leadership has to be somebody who's very sensitive to the needs of students for whom nothing's ever worked. I don't want to prescribe the race or ethnicity or the gender or the background of who that leader should be, but they need to have an idea of how to reach that population.
Excellent point. Any comments or questions from our remote location?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. When are you going? You said the full board will select the CEO. Are you going to send forward the 3 final candidates?
I think we're going to be,
And the full board.
Trustee Shaw, we're going to be working on that process with the Chancellor. Go ahead, Chancellor.
The expectation would be that the full board receive the final candidate, that the executive committee forward a recommendation to the full board.
Okay. My second question is, how long will the Board of Governors be the Board of Trustees? Are we going to evolve out of that role, or as the institutions begin to grow, will it have its own Board of Trustees?
The legislation names the Board of Governors as the governing body of the California Online Community College District. So we are the Board of Trustees, pending any changes in legislation. We are the Board of Trustees.
Okay. Thank you.
Trustee Anderson, correct?
A quick question on the executive committee. Who on the executive committee is a technology expert, or do we have a technology expert on that executive committee?
So we haven't appointed the executive committee yet.
Okay,
But
I saw that.
But as you'll find later on, I'm recommending a slate including Trustee Rawlings. So we can discuss that at that point.
Okay.
Okay. Walker Griffin? Trustee? No? Okay. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on this matter in the remote location? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion on this item. Moved by Trustee Perry, seconded by Trustee Anderson. Let's call the roll.
Hildegard Aguinaldo.
Aye.
Darius Anderson. Jeff Baum.
Yes.
Connie Conway. Tom Epstein.
Yes.
Cecilia Estelano.
Aye.
Jolina Grande.
Aye.
Pamela Haynes.
Aye.
Jennifer Perry. Bill Rawlings.
Yes.
Valerie Shaw.
Yes.
Alexander Walker Griffin.
Yes.
Motion is approved. On to item 5, delegation to conduct search for legal counsel.
This item is to seek approval of a resolution to delegate authority to the Chancellor to conduct a search and retain a law firm, private law firm, to represent the Board of Trustees as its general counsel and to perform a variety of legal services for the Board of Trustees. That search is well underway, actually, and hopefully we'll be in a position to enter into a contract with a very reputable and experienced law firm to provide services to the Board of Trustees within a few weeks. As you mentioned, Member Anderson, there's a lot of work to be done to get ready for the operations of the firm. A number of policies and procedures, a lot of thinking about how to enter into contracts that relate to IT, labor, and a wide variety of other issues. And so the Board of Trustees will need experienced assistance and a lot of resources to throw at the legal issues. And so this resolution is tailored on the previous resolution for the CEO, with the idea that the Chancellor will need authority expeditiously to enter into a contract for legal services for the Board of Trustees. And so, again, it is pinned to market rates, and and early signing by the Chancellor.
And the contract will not exceed 2 years. Again, we're standing up the new district. So this is our initial outside counsel. Trustee Haynes, followed by Trustee Anderson.
So, please forgive how I'm going to say this. As you envision the legal requirements of the law firm, is it the run-of-the-mill legal kinds of things, or is there some kind of skill or experience relative to the online component of this?
There are, I think, two sets of skills that are critical to the legal services that the district will need in a relatively short period of time, 3, 6, 12 months, 2 years. Experience dealing with the online component, the technology, I think, is one that we're very much aware of as being a high priority. And then the other is governance experience over community college districts. I think those, in my view, are the two prongs that are probably most critical. So there's a public law component, and there's also a technology component that we need to make sure the Board of Trustees has coverage on.
Trustee Anderson.
Mark, I couldn't agree with you more. The problem is, knowing a few of the firms out there that do, some of that work, it's oftentimes, depending on the firm, difficult to find, somebody that's got an expertise in both particular areas. Do you find that you've got good candidates? Because I can tell you, if we don't hire the right firm, it's one thing to have public law experience. That's really important, especially, with our structure. But not having that technology experience as quickly as the world is moving right now could be deadly for us. So, if we could either look at if there is one firm that serves both, or bifurcate the contract, where, one firm does the public law and the other does technology.
That's a good point, Member Anderson, and the resolution does actually authorize a contract or contracts, and it's really with that thought in mind that we included that.
Trustee Grande.
Thank you. Previously, I had asked you when we were doing the policies and procedures about the bids for professional service contracts. And with the last item, the same language appears that I'm about to quote, because of the need to move swiftly on the contract, it will be effective upon its execution and shall not require subsequent ratification by the Board of Trustees or the Executive Committee. Does that contract that we're referring to in this item, similar to the previous item, appear to be less than $100,000, even though it will last 2 years?
I would expect that this would be above $100,000, these contracts. Certainly if we did one contract, I think likely potentially both would be above that amount.
Why would it not be necessary to receive subsequent ratification from the board?
So the idea here was to move quickly and have the contracts in effect as soon as possible. And there may be some debate on this point, but if a contract is subject to subsequent ratification, it's not actually in effect legally. So it needs to be executed, and we need to be able to get the contractors to work as soon as possible. I think the other prong of this is that we have the legal counsel's office has been working collaboratively with Chancellor Eloy and President Estolano, Vice President Epstein, Ajita very closely on identifying the firm. So there is oversight on this process that is inherent in it. That's a concern.
Yeah, let me just note that we've issued a request for proposals. There were the proposals were screened. We narrowed it down to a few firms. Interviews were conducted. The panel consisted of Chancellor Oakley, myself, Vice President Epstein, our general counsel, our senior advisor, and with an eye to being able to quickly move on this because it is a critical element to formation of anything. And the notion of having possibly more than one legal counsel on a bench has been contemplated as well, so that we're fully covered. So this is moving quickly. but we would ask for your approval to go beyond 100,000. Legal services aren't cheap. We're doing this at competitive rates. We're working on trying to make sure we have cost conservation measures, some innovative approaches to managing some of this legal work so that we're not paying top dollar. But we do need to get law firms with an expertise in both areas. So we are fairly confident that we have, we're more than fairly confident, we're quite confident that we have excellent candidates, and would very much like to move forward so we can get a lawyer on board. Nobody more so than probably our general counsel, the first day. Any other questions from our remote location?
I have a question, President Estolano. Is the idea that at the end of 2 years we would retain in-house counsel? We would try to hire them on an in-house basis?
I think we cross that bridge when we get there. Trustee Aguinaldo, I think we may want to continue on having a mix of outside and in-house counsel. I think we won't know until we reach that point, but we didn't want to commit a contract longer than 2 years, knowing there'd be a lot of startup.
Okay, so does that mean that at the end of 2 years you can renew the contract, but it can't be extended? Is there a difference between those two terms?
Well, we have not drafted the contract yet, so we can think about how to work that. But I think once we get past this initial phase, the determination of how to handle legal representation is going to involve the CEO. So I think we will try to draft something in a way that will permit the CEO flexibility at the end of the contract term.
Okay, it just says in the bullet point on the second page of the memo that it shall not exceed a term of 2 years, including any extension. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Right.
Yeah.
And then my second question is it worth, to tag along Board Member Grande's question, is it worth kind of revising the language here to say subject to the ratification of the co-chair, of the chair and vice chair?
I think the vice chair, the chair and vice chair are going to be very much involved in the selection of the firm.
But it doesn't say formally that they are.
I mean, we're happy to add that. Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe shall
and
require,
then,
but shall require ratification by.
Sorry, I keep interrupting.
That's okay. So I'm suggesting it should be effective upon execution. The third is shall require ratification or require approval of notification of the president and the vice president of the Board of Trustees, and shall not require subsequent ratification of the Board of Trustees or the Executive Committee. Okay. Go ahead, Trustee Aguinaldo.
Just one other question. This is not the chair and vice chair, right? It's the president and vice president?
Yeah, we're president and vice president of the Board of Trustees, and if we approve a resolution regarding the Executive Committee, that's chair and vice chair of the Executive Committee.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
President Solano, can I just be clear on the language that you're proposing? So, and shall require the ratification of president and vice president of the board.
And ratification is an odd word. I think it shall require approval.
Approval, okay.
Let's do that. Okay. Any other comments? Any members of the public seeking to make comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion. Motion by Vice President Epstein, second by Trustee Rawlings. All right, all those in favor, wait for the roll call.
Hildegard Aguinaldo.
Aye.
Darius Anderson. Jeffrey Baum.
Aye.
Tom Epstein. Cecilia Estolano.
Aye.
Jolena Grande.
Yes.
Pamela Haynes.
Aye.
Jennifer Perry. Bill Rawlings.
Yes.
Valerie Shaw,
Yes.
Alexander Walker Griffin.
Yes.
All right, motion is approved. On to item 6, meetings of the Board of Trustees. Quite important.
Very
Take it
important.
away.
So this is the opportunity for the Board of Trustees to exercise oversight over the Executive Committee. I think the initial thinking in discussing this with the President, Vice President, and the Chancellor is that the Executive Committee is likely to meet once a month at least, and certainly for the first year or so. And the full Board of Trustees would meet on the same schedule as the Board of Governors, gaveling out as Board of Governors and gaveling in as the Board of Trustees to coordinate meetings for purposes of ease of calendar and expenses and the like. So the purpose of this resolution is just to essentially adopt as the Board of Trustees meeting schedule, the Board of Governors meeting schedule.
And so, for example, for our September meeting of the Board of Governors, we would gavel out on Tuesday, September 18th as the Board of Governors and gavel in around 12 or 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Tuesday, September 18th as the Board of Trustees of the Online Community College District. And we would just do that at every one of our Board of Governors meetings. Conclude our business and then convene as the Board of Trustees. Any questions from members of the Board of Trustees? Trustee Baum.
Question one is, do we have to be so prescriptive that it has to be either after, or could it be before? Could it be
could be before.
concurrently? I mean,
Yeah, the resolution does say that. We could say, we could be less prescriptive and just
to give us some flexibility. That,
Oh, apparently not. Let's see.
And then the other question is, as a legal body, a state body, I thought there was a requirement that trustees have to meet at least once a month. How do we get around that? Is that a requirement or not?
that the trustees need to meet.
A governing body of a college district, traditionally, I believe, can meet, is required to meet at least once a month. Some of them meet twice a month. Is that true or not? Is it at our discretion as the trustees that we could meet bi-monthly?
I think we were thinking that the executive committee is going to be meeting monthly. Of course, that is not the full board of trustees, and that's the point you're making. I'll have to look into that because I was not aware of that.
Right. Is the executive committee have legal authority to be a surrogate for the board of trustees on the months that the board is not meeting?
Let us look into that a little more specifically. It certainly does on most issues, but as you'll see from the delegation, it's not on everything.
That question came up when we were discussing bill language with the legislature, and that was the intent, is to ensure that the board of trustees could delegate to whether an executive committee or what have you, the ability to meet monthly, if or more if necessary. So, but we'll certainly take a hard look to make sure that that is consistent with.
Yeah, I'm not advocating for more meetings. I just want to be clear on that.
That's the thinking behind having the executive committee meet on a monthly basis. That would fulfill our obligation statutorily to meet on a monthly basis, because most authority has been delegated or would be delegated to the executive committee. But we would continue to have oversight as a full board of trustees via our bi-monthly meeting that runs roughly at the same time or on the same day as the Board of Governors. And our executive vice chancellor wants to say something, deputy chancellor wants to say something about why it has to be scheduled right after the Board of Governors.
Well, only for September, actually. So
Okay.
in Chula Vista, we can certainly do it 12 to 4.
Okay.
And then moving forward, you can reconsider whether you want to have it before or after. Our November Board of Governors meeting is meeting on a Tuesday and Wednesday. So I think it would be chair, vice chair, and all of you.
So if we adopt this resolution, it is specific about it's happening at the conclusion of the Board of Governors meeting. So we probably want to have more flexible language.
Yeah, I would just recommend that in
Yeah.
conjunction with the Board of Governors meeting, only to allow the flexibility. Maybe it's a very light agenda and it could be
Yes.
dispensed with before the meeting starts.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. Any objections? So we'll substitute that first bullet. We'll say that it shall conduct meetings in conjunction. Well, it's not really in conjunction.
Whatever the
On the
appropriate
same
language would
schedule
be.
as the, Jason. On the same schedule,
On the same dates.
on the same dates. Yeah. As the regular meetings of the California Community Colleges Board of Governors. Say that because we set a regular meeting schedule, we may have special meetings, but that's not the intent. Is that it's on the regular meetings of the California Community Colleges Board of Governors. Okay.
Okay.
Other questions, comments? Our remote location, Trustee Shaw and Aguinaldo, any questions?
No questions, President Estolano.
Okay. I see we have no speaker cards. Nobody seems to be doing anything at the remote location. Do you have a question, ma'am, from the member of the audience? If you can come forward, and then when you're done, you can fill out a speaker card, but please go ahead and come forward and speak on the microphone. Identify your name, that would be terrific, and then we'll just have you fill out a speaker card afterwards. Yes, and you
Thank
have
you.
3 minutes to address
Thank
the
you.
board.
My name is Jody Steele. I'm from Fresno City College, and I am the Director of Distance Education there, and also the co-chair of the OEI Advisory Committee.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak. Just as a person who works at a community college district and recognizing our board and how often they meet, especially for special meetings, I was wondering if there was going to be an outline for how those would be conducted, and if virtual attendance by the board, I'm not sure where everybody is from, but in light of what we're establishing here, if virtual attendance for special board meetings would be a consideration.
Thank you very much for asking that question. And Ms. Manon, if you want to come forward and address that, and if you could just fill out a speaker card, Ms. Steele, that would be great. Bettina, do you want to come forward and talk about that? Because we did have, and Mr. LaForcier, we did have a debate about virtual meetings, some discussion about this. Go ahead.
So the only thing I would say is operationally, I think we aim to be as inclusive as possible, recognizing how people are place constrained, especially given the nature of the enterprise itself. So we are looking into what kinds of capabilities that we will have for future meetings to provide that kind of remote access. So still TBT in terms of what we can accommodate, but that certainly would be our intention.
Correct. Go ahead.
As a legal matter, the Brown Act sets a floor, so to the extent we can provide make it more accessible, we should be able to do that. The key for attendance of board members is that they need to be in a public setting where public members of the public can physically be present and participate in the meeting. But in terms of making the meetings more accessible for viewership, that's something we should be able to do.
Yes, and just as a matter of practicality, there's some key issues that we need to consider. We need to consider having participation from your living room would not be possible. So when we talk about remote locations, it would have to be in a place where the public can access, where the public can gather, hear the board meeting. So it is a little bit constrained in that regard. We would also have to staff it. So those are just considerations that we would need to keep in mind. I think as a matter of practice, we can think about creating spaces or identifying spaces in geographical locations throughout the state that would make it easier to maintain on an ongoing basis. So my point is it couldn't move from place to place depending on the meeting. We would need to establish a few locations throughout the state where members could attend in that region. So those are just some of the considerations we'll have to make.
Trustee Anderson.
But with an online college, isn't the idea to continue to evolve? I mean, to have it tied to a physical location, and maybe because I know that you have to have public notification in that location where you are doing the hearing, but, you know, I would hope that the campus would have real-time audio, visual, you know, and if I want to go ahead and, you know, tap in at, you know, a public location, you know, if it's a coffee shop, and I have the ability to go ahead and do all the public notification, shouldn't that what we'd be shooting for? since we are the first ever in the country and it's an online college?
I think those are certainly considerations that we will have to juxtapose to the law and see where we can land. But yes, I mean, I think that we should strive to make it as open and accessible as possible. I think those are considerations. In that regard, it would be, good for us to find partners in geographic locations where we can set up robust technology infrastructure so that it is much more easy for the public to view. Because I think that's the major consideration, is making sure that the public can have access to the board meeting wherever we're at. It's not so much the member, him or herself, it is having access to the public. So that's where we're going to have to work with legal counsel to figure out how virtual we can get, and perhaps if there's a way to have a virtual participation, then something we can consider.
Within the confines of the Brown Act, there's one thing about the members themselves and where they have to be able to notice the meeting where they are located. And we're doing 2 members right now in West Los Angeles College, so I understand it, are using facilities there. But in terms of accessing or creating venues whereby members of the public may participate and, for example, testify, make public comment, that can be done. Certainly the city of Los Angeles has 450 square miles, has on occasion done that and made remote locations available for members of the public to appear, monitor, make public comment. So we'll have to work on that. I do think Ms. Steele's point about having some form of video conferencing, that's something I think would be very, very useful and seems like something we should figure out for the online community college, but we're hopeful to do that. And I think it's, again, everything within the confines of the Brown Act. So let's keep on that, because I think it's very useful, particularly if we want to make available remote locations where members of the public can gather and make statements.
Another idea might be to have some mediated public comment from people's desktops. They wouldn't
Right.
necessarily need to gather in a spot to participate, but if we could figure out a way within the Brown Act to hear comments and respond to them, that might be another.
It might also be something where this body, as truly an online entity, might come up, if we run up against the Brown Act, for some procedures that make a lot of sense for people to have mediated public comment that we can't get around with the existing Brown Act. It would certainly be a great suggestion to the legislature to revise the Brown Act to enable that type of online communication. That would be a really nice thing for this college to advance. Bring us into the 20th century. Okay. Any other comments by members of the public? I don't hear any. I don't see any. Last comments by members of the Board of Trustees. I'll entertain a motion.
I move.
Okay. Motion by Trustee Rawlings.
Second.
Second by Trustee Walker Griffin.
The language was amended.
Yes, thank you. This, again, to remind the board members, we're going to amend the first bullet of item 6, attachment 1, that it shall conduct meetings on the same schedule as the regular. You guys give me some language back.
That it shall conduct meetings on the same dates as the regular meetings of the California College's Board of Governors.
Great, thank you. And with that change, that's the motion. Let's call the roll.
Hildegard Aguinaldo.
Aye.
Darius Anderson.
Yes.
Jeffrey Baum.
Yes.
Tom Epstein. Cecilia Estolano.
Aye.
Jolina Grande.
Yes.
Pamela Haynes.
Aye.
Jennifer Perry. Bill Rawlings.
Yes.
Valerie Shaw.
Yes.
Alexander Walker Griffin.
Yes.
All right, that motion has been approved. We're almost done. We're a third of the way through, 2/3 of the way through. Pretty great. Okay, next, we're taking item number 7, establishment of an executive committee of the Board of Trustees. This is a very important item. Mr. LeForestier will introduce it, and I'm going to make a few comments about it because I'll just say a few things. First of all, this is about delegating authority, day-to-day responsibilities that a typical Board of Trustees of a community college would undertake. We are cognizant that when you were when you applied for appointment to the Board of Governors, you contemplated that you would have a bi-monthly meeting. Most of us didn't really count on having monthly meetings. It's also typically, a Board of Trustees is comprised of 5 to 7 members, not typically 13 to 17 members, depending on who was present at that time. So it's a rather large number for a Board of Trustees. So we contemplated that it makes sense to delegate a lot of the day-to-day authority to a 7-member Board of Trustees Executive Committee that would fulfill most but not all of the responsibilities of the Board of Trustees. And I'll ask Mr. Leforestier to walk you through these responsibilities, but I will note that on the first page of the staff report, we've pulled out the 4 specific responsibilities of the Board of Trustees that we have reserved to the full Board of Trustees, because these are significant decisions. For example, policies governing current and long-range academic and facilities plans and programs, and the promotion of orderly growth and development of the California Online Community College. Just the basic visioning and planning function of a Board of Trustees seems like something that we should reserve to the Board of Trustees. Second, the chief executive officer's employment, making that offer, determining who will be the CEO, should be invested in the full Board of Trustees. Third, control over the college's operational and capital outlay budgets. And finally, real property for the use and benefit of the college. Real property transactions are significant, can have major implications financially for a college district. We wanted that to be reserved to the full Board of Trustees. But the remainder of the obligations and responsibilities we propose be delegated to an executive committee. I think I just did your staff report. Sorry, Mark.
Did it very well.
Take it away if there's anything else you want to add.
So I could walk through, there are, let's see, probably 14, 15 specific responsibilities. Should I walk through each of those that we are delegating to the executive committee? Quite likely, happy to do it.
I think the question is, so this is pulled straight out of the legislation. There's a section in the legislation that enumerates the responsibilities of the Board of Trustees, or rather the governing body of the Online Community College District. And these have been imported into this resolution. We can go through them one by one. I trust that members of the board have reviewed this document, but if there's anything in particular you want to highlight or ask a question about, we'd ask you to do so during the question and answer series.
So I would highlight 3 general additional concepts that we inserted into the resolution to preserve authority to the Board of Trustees. So one is that unless we have expressly delegated authority to the executive committee, it's retained. So there is a concept of inherent authority that the Board of Trustees may have. And so to the extent that we have not delegated something to the executive committee, it is retained. The other element is that the Board of Trustees can always reassert jurisdiction over any of the matters that the executive committee is today. So this isn't a permanent delegation of authority. If we come to the conclusion at a later date that it would be more appropriate for the Board of Trustees to exercise that authority, then the Board of Trustees can do that. And then the other thing is that there was a sense that there may be some issues of such sensitivity that arise within the executive committee's authority that the executive committee may still want to get the Board of Trustees' views on. And so the resolution specifically authorizes the executive committee to do that. So it is a grant of authority, but it's not, it doesn't prejudice the executive committee's ability to come back to the board for its insight, consideration.
So there's really 3 big things. One is this formation of an executive committee with responsibilities enumerated here. Secondly, that the president and vice president of the Board of Trustees would serve as the chair and vice chair of the executive committee. And third, I've made a recommendation on the initial members of that executive committee. And I'm recommending that the following members of the Board of Trustees serve as the executive committee: Hildegard Aguinaldo, Jeffrey Baum, Tom Epstein, myself, Jolena Grande, Pamela Haynes, and Bill Rawlings. So that is the staff recommendation. and after conferring quite closely with Vice President Epstein and myself, and let's open it up to any questions or comments. Trustee Haynes.
So I just, can you give examples of what would be auxiliary services? I'm just not quite sure, I'm not seeing that term.
I consider that to be a reference to auxiliary organizations and whatever services they would provide. Was that your understanding too, Chancellor?
Yes, as well as like any of our other colleges, they have the ability to create auxiliary organizations. So a foundation, let's say, for the new college, or to be able to set up an auxiliary enterprise for like a bookstore, a virtual bookstore, or so most of our colleges have set up auxiliaries to run those operations, and so this would give the college the same authority.
Thank you.
Trustee
A question. You've prescribed in the resolution the names of the initial members of the committee, but when I was board chair, I was able to appoint committee members. Will we have to go through a resolution each time there's a transition in committee?
I think we, at least as we've created this at this point, trustees would confirm the members of the executive committee. If we want to do that in a different way, we can change the policies and procedures.
The notion is that the president would, in essence, recommend, and the full board would act on that recommendation.
I was just saying, for the purity of this resolution,
Yeah.
maybe you make two separate, you pull that clause out, and then you put forth the committee members for board ratification, only
As a
like
separate
like when we
action?
did the search
Yeah.
committee for the chancellor, I made those appointments as the board chair, and then the board ratified that. But that's just something for consideration, other than having to amend this resolution
I
each
hear you.
time.
That's a good procedural suggestion.
The one thing I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight of, and I'm not disagreeing with the comment, but as you think about other comments, this is a very important signal in our recruitment for the new CEO. If a new CEO feels like his or her board can change overnight, there is a hesitation to commit to moving from one part of the country to another part of the country. So we just want to signal as much stability in that initial group as possible.
And I'm fine with leaving it as is for this first
Yeah.
time until we get established, but I'm noting that going forward as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good process question, suggestion, Trustee Baum. We have noticed this item to contain all of those. We can't vote on something we haven't agendized already. So in the future, I think that's an excellent practice. Trustee Walker Griffin.
So I have two questions. Under J, under the executive committee shall exercise jurisdiction over the following matters. What academic calendar would be the model to reflect this new college's school year? Because I know some districts have really different time periods in which they're in school. And the second one is there an example of state and federal information and technology policies and statutes? I'm a little unclear about what that really means.
On your first question, the Board of Trustees has not adopted an academic calendar, probably won't for a little while, but the academic calendar we would imagine is one that's open with the ability for students to enroll throughout the month or a period of time. So it would look very different than the current academic calendar. But that is something we want to reserve for the founding members of the online college.
I will just mention that we also can rely and benchmark to what existing providers who provide competency-based education and online instruction also do. So that will be a decision that you can make with some information about how some of the other leading providers also do that, which we'll provide.
And then on item, paragraph M, compliance with the accessibility requirements of state and federal electronic. Is that what, that was the, Gina, if you want to jump in on that one?
Sure. So actually, that's something that the new council will also help extensively with, ensuring that every aspect, both of the college's design and the college's offerings, will be compliant with requirements associated with individuals with disabilities.
Yeah, that's the main point of that, is that we're in compliance with the ADA. Accessibility. Other questions? Trustee Perry.
Not so much a question. I just want to commend you. I think it's a judicious selection for the executive committee. And given the amount of extra travel, I hope you all get an enhanced Vino Volo membership. I would move that come with it. But no, it's a great selection.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from our remote location?
Yes, I have a question, or an observation. I think that, you mentioned earlier that obviously we are the only appointed district board of trustees in the entire state now. And I think we need to think that, this lends itself to a bit of volatility because we do come and go more than the elected trustees do throughout the state. So that's something to think about. I think we also need to be sensitive about diversity in terms of establishing the executive committee and make sure that exists. And then finally, the tenure of an executive committee member. Are they there during their entire Board of Governors trustee appointment? Do they come and go, or how does that work?
Go ahead and
So the policies and procedures are intentionally silent on that. Something that we discussed, but it seemed like a larger conversation, and so we have put that over for future consideration in terms of tenure of the members and the composition of the members.
Yeah, I mean, we're just standing this up. A couple of points. In terms of the continuity of the members of the Board of Trustees, public members are appointed for 6-year terms, and we don't serve at the pleasure. We have 6-year defined terms, so that's a pretty good sense of continuity. This happens on a staggered basis, so we have a mix of members with long tenure, on the recommendations that I've made, a mix of long tenured members as well as those who've been recently appointed by design. Your point about diversity is critical. I've tried to balance that as well as expertise. And the wonderful thing about this board is that it's a board that is heavy on well-qualified experts and from a variety of fields. And diverse. So that was actually not at all difficult. We have really a great mix of folks, as well as mix of representatives, individuals with experience serving on a board of trustees, individuals from representing the faculty, representing the classified employees, representing a variety of places around the state. Worked hard to balance that. And lastly, in terms of the tenure of the executive committee, the duration of the term, we did leave it open. I would recommend that it be at least 2 years, just again to give sense of continuity, but we haven't placed it in this resolution. So it's something to consider. So I'm not sure if somebody wants to move approval of that tenure, but we think certainly 2 years would be, I would recommend that would be the minimum. But I also understand what the chancellor's point is that folks want to know who are they reporting to. It's pretty critical, and trustees typically serve for 4-year terms. So this is a balancing act. Trustee Haynes.
I just wanted to add a strong recommendation. It's what the chancellor said. As a member of a board of trustees, when you bring candidates in front of you for the presidency, for the CEO position, one of the things they do in terms of their research is to research what is the tenure of the members of the board. To what extent have they been a cohesive or at least a long-standing body, because that's what you're actually looking for. And to what extent do you work well together as a board to move the institution forward. Those are just two critical things that they look at, because they're looking for an extension of their career, and they really don't want to be seen as moving around or jumping from one position to another. So they're looking at the membership of the board. They're looking at those profiles to see what kind of members are participating.
Trustee Walker Griffin.
Just a quick question. So what role would I fit into this? Because I know that just about every district has a student trustee. Is there a way that I can have some sort of influence into the executive committee? What's going on there?
It's an excellent point. As we talked about or thought through organizing an executive committee, I wanted very much to include a student representative. And my hope is that as we actually enroll students, that we have a representative of our student body. And we have yet to have any students at the online college. And we could do it very much in the same fashion that a local trustees would do it, some sort of an ex officio member or representative of the students could serve. We haven't figured it out yet, but rest assured that we will be conferring with you and whoever will may be appointed as the other Board of Governors student representative. But our hope is that the trustees of the online community college, we might have some way to have them, the actual students who enroll in the community college, in the online community college, participate. Trustee Baum.
Yeah, just speaking to Trustee Shaw's point, would be I would anticipate that after we have a CEO on board and we have a bit of time under our belts, we'll revisit a lot of these procedures in terms of appropriate terms for executive committee members too, because eventually we'll be getting a new president and vice president of the board, and how does that
That's
all
correct.
fit into that as well?
That is an excellent point. And I think also having legal counsel on board will help us think through the implications of all of these appointments, all these actions. Other questions or comments? Any members of the public wishing to speak on this item?
Oh,
yes, go ahead.
pardon me. I wanted to echo Board Members Perry comment that, yeah, it's a good group, Cecilia. It's a good group.
Thank you,
But
Valerie.
I still want to hear my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. That's much appreciated. All right. Let me entertain a motion on this matter, on this item number 7. Do I have a motion? Okay, I have a motion by Trustee Grande. Do I have a second? Second by Board Member Perry. I'll get you on the next one, Hildy. Okay, let's take the roll, please. Let's call the roll.
Hildegard Aguinaldo.
Aye.
Darius Anderson. Jeffrey Baum.
Yes.
Tom Epstein.
Aye.
Cecilia Estolano.
Aye.
Jolena Grande.
Aye.
Pamela Haynes.
Aye.
Jennifer Perry. Bill Rawlings.
Aye.
Valerie Shaw.
Yes.
Alexander Walker Griffin.
Aye.
All right, the motion has been approved. On to item 8, meetings of the Executive Committee. Take it away, Mark.
Mike.
Thank you. This is really just an information and discussion item, an invitation to members of the Board of Trustees to discuss and recommend what an appropriate meeting schedule ought to be for the Executive Committee, with the expectation that the Executive Committee would then adopt a schedule at its first meeting.
Okay. Monthly?
Monthly. So the idea, I think the expectation was that the Board of Trustees, the Executive Committee, would set its meetings on the first day of Board of Governors meetings as an opportunity to conduct business, and then I think the origination of the idea of the Board of Trustees meetings following the Board of Governors meetings would be that the Executive Committee would meet in the morning. And then, or before the Board of Governors then would meet, And then whatever staff work was required to report or ratify or have the Board of Trustees ratify actions that have been taken by the executive committee could be prepared and provided on the second day. And then the executive committee would also be meeting in the months during which the Board of Governors does not meet.
So it sounds like the expectation is we, as member of the full Board of Trustees, would talk about how frequently expected the executive committee to meet, and that would form the basis of a direction to staff to then begin to try to schedule those meetings on behalf of the executive committee. Trustee Baum.
So,
I would obviously concur with the idea of trying to align them as closely to the Board of Governors calendar as possible, so that in the months that the Board of Governors does not meet, or the Board of Trustees does not meet, then we'd have to identify a time and a place for that to take place. I wanted to open the possibility of, so my board has had evening meetings in the past when I served on a local board, and would that be an well, and obviously, can we find a location in Southern California that would be able to facilitate participation? Didn't require an extra trip to Sacramento.
That's a terrific idea. Other thoughts on scheduling meetings?
We'd love to have you in LA.
Yeah, you guys can escape the smoke. Any other thoughts? So we've talked about obviously monthly meetings, so there'll be a meeting on the off month that we're not meeting as a Board of Governors and the full Board of Trustees, possibly holding these meetings in the evening like a conventional local Board of Trustees. And third, possibly convening the meetings in the Southern California location where most of the state's population lives. Just saying.
Would you like us to go back and forth between Sacramento and Southern California? Is there any preference to that, or?
Obviously, the Board of Governors primarily meets, and the Board of Trustees will primarily meet in Sacramento. So in the off months, I would.
Are you against Long Beach?
But and then what I would suggest is perhaps the chair and the vice chair of the committee then come back with a proposed schedule.
That's a great idea. Any other, Vice President Epstein?
As you were saying that, Mark, I just had a question. Does that mean if you're on the executive committee, when there's a regular meeting of the Board of Governors, that the executive committee would meet before the Board of Governors meeting, then the Board of Governors would meet, and then the Board of Trustees would meet to ratify what happened with the Board of Governors meeting? So there'd be 3 meetings.
Yes.
That
Possible.
day. Yeah. Okay.
It's possible. Busy. Any other comments or questions from our remote location? I believe Trustees Shaw and Aguinaldo might be interested in Los Angeles, or I'm sorry, Southern California-based meetings.
Also, Mount Sac or Cypress College
Yeah.
could be fantastic locations.
Yeah. That's right.
Right for you.
Okay, so I think we have some general direction, and the President, Vice President can work on a proposal. Obviously, we'll be polling members of the Executive Committee to see what makes sense in terms of scheduling on the months we're not meeting as a Board of Trustees. Yeah.
So just for planning purposes, I presume the September meeting will be as planned and the dates as planned. So we
Correct.
actually would look ahead to an October meeting of the Executive Committee.
Correct. And our Deputy Chancellor has suggested that we have an Executive Committee meeting on Tuesday, September 18th from 1 to 4 p.m. I think that's what we're going to be planning. And that'll happen in San Diego, where we're doing our offsite meeting. Okay.
Chula Vista.
Chula Vista. Okay, I think we're on to item number 9, which is a overview and discussion of other ongoing work related to the formation of the college.
So this last item was really an opportunity to update you on anything that we're anticipating. The only item that I have is ongoing work on retaining the independent legal counsel for the community college district, and we're proceeding on that. As I mentioned earlier, we should be able to have contracts in place within the next hopefully 2 to 3 weeks. I don't think that's too ambitious a schedule given where we are now. So you can expect a report on that at your next meeting.
So beyond the outline for the timeline for the progress on the CEO search, the only other thing that we wanted to mention was something that we did at the Board of Governors meeting, which is the launch of a design thinking process that would allow us to start to engage some of the prospective students for the online college, especially in the early pathways. That is also going to be a great opportunity for additional stakeholder involvement, and as soon as we have a set of dates around potential engagement throughout the state to conduct certain focus groups with students as well as faculty, we will share that with the Board of Trustees, and we would love to see your participation. Some of these meetings will be conducted in regional locations. We'll try to give it as much advance notice as possible, but stay tuned for that.
Okay, that's it for next steps. We'll take public comment, then there'll be a couple of announcements, and then we'll adjourn. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on a matter that has not been agendized? And that goes for here in Sacramento as well as our remote location in West Los Angeles.
Yes. We have some visitors here. They're just going to mention their names. And
Hi, I'm Eric Eshawn, Dean of Distance Learning, Instructional Technology, and Library Services here at West Los Angeles College.
And I'm Rebecca Pang, Director of Distance Education for Cerro Coastal Community College.
I'm Rosalind Haley, former Dean of Counseling and Matriculation, just having returned from abroad, now working as an independent consultant and adjunct.
Michelle Grimes-Spillman, Dean Academic Affairs, Long Beach City College.
we're pleased to have them here today.
Thank you so much for attending our founding meeting at the Board of Trustees. It's great to have you. All right, with that, I'm going to make an announcement. Today, the governor appointed 2 new members of the Board of Governors of the California Community Colleges, and it's terrific appointments. Amy Costa, who's the Chief Deputy Director of the Department of Finance. She's from Alameda, California, and hopefully she'll be joining us in September. It's pretty cool. And then second, Blas Villalobos, Director of Veterans Affairs of Chapman University from Lakewood, California. So they will, I hope, both be joining us in September. Wonderful. We're getting up to full complement of board members. Chancellor?
Yes, if I could add to your announcement. First of all, let me just say I have worked with Amy Costa for many, many, many years. She is a tremendous advocate for the California Community Colleges, and she will be a great addition to the Board of Governors as she transitions from her role with the Department of Finance after this administration. And she also had a direct hand in the establishment of the online college. So she will be a great resource specifically about the legislative language that we entered into, because she had a direct hand in that legislative language. And Blas Villalobos, I have known for many, many years. He was a student at Long Beach City College. He's a Marine, a veteran, now pursuing his doctorate as well. And I think you will find him a tremendous advocate for our veteran students. He has represented veteran students at both the community college and the CSU. So he will be a great addition to the board, albeit a Marine, but we'll live with that. And then I do have a very bittersweet announcement. The governor also announced new members of the Board of Regents for the University of California, and I'll switch hats for a little bit. And so I'm, on the one hand, very excited about the announcement, but as Chancellor, I'm also disappointed with the announcement, and that is that Cecilia Estelano has been appointed to the University of California Board of Regents. So I will continue to see her in a different hat. I will very much miss her in this hat. She has been a tremendous leader of the Board of Governors. Certainly one of the reasons I chose to take this job, based on interacting with her as well as Member Baum. And she's been a wonderful thought partner and very supportive to me and my team. And so we would not be here today talking about the online college without her leadership. without her testimony and without her constant advocacy on behalf of our students. So thank you, Cecilia. And I look forward to working with you, the Board of Regents. That is what I would consider a demotion, but nonetheless, I look forward to seeing you there.
Thank you. Thank you for the announcement. I want to thank the governor for the appointment, but mostly I want to thank the governor for the tremendous honor of serving on the Board of Governors of the California Community Colleges. When I took this appointment, I noted that my mother had been a long-time part-time instructor at a variety of community colleges throughout the Los Angeles area, and what an honor it was to serve. And I have just felt like this has been some of the best work I've ever had the privilege of being associated with. I came in and got to be a part of scorecard and the strong workforce task force that we worked on making sure we had associate's degrees for transfers that were happening. I think some of the amazing work we've done, certainly this year on online community college and the funding formula shifts, but mostly just the ability to meet students and do what we can to advocate and make this a tremendous window of opportunity for so many people in the state of California that really need to improve their skills and get the certificates and the credentials they need to enter the middle class. It's just been an honor, and mostly, you guys have been a wonderful board to work with. I've enjoyed every meeting I've ever had here over the last 5 years have been great. It's such a collegial board, and I think we've done some terrific work together, and one of my proudest accomplishments will be having recruited and gotten Eloy Oakley to serve as the great chancellor of the community colleges. So I am delighted to have served, and hopefully I'll get confirmed to be a regent. But anyway, want to thank you all, and I look forward to continuing on and serving the students of California. Thank you. All right. Thank you.
I do want to, since we have great support from West LA College, thank them for hosting us. Thank you to the Wildcats at West LA for opening up your doors for this first meeting of the online college.
And we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Wow, congrats.
Thanks.
So this meeting